Good afternoon. This is a Devar Torah on Parshas Beshalach, the fourth Parsha in Sefer Shmos, and a Parsha of transformation where the Jewish people come from a people of slavery to where they become a true start on the way to a nation, full nation. And the power of the Egyptians over them is finally broken by Hashem. The Parsha begins with Pharaoh and his servants regretting that they let the Jewish people go. They said, how could we do this? They were slaves, we had their services, suddenly we let them go. Now, how could the Egyptian people have done this exactly 3 days after the killing of the firstborn in the 10th plague? In essence, it shows that Hashem strengthened the hearts of Pharaoh and his servants. Now, strengthening of heart here means that Hashem took away the terror factor, let them have free will to do what they wanted, which it was, as complete Rishoyim, evil people, was to destroy the Jews. And they pursued them. Hashem, through a series of miracles, including the splitting of the Yam Suf, the Reed Sea, which was split into 12 parts. And in an amazing aspect, Hashem, wanting to keep the rules of nature as close as possible to what they started with, made every body of water and container of water, any vessel containing water, to split into 12 parts also. After the Jews miraculously get across with a number of different miracles, Hashem performed for him to make the trip across as pleasant as possible. In the morning, the Egyptians are drowned. Then Moshe and all the Jewish men sing a song of praise to Hashem, first of what we call of the Shir, of which there are 10. The 10th one has not yet been written, as we'll be celebrating the events of the end of days and the coming of Mashiach and David. The Jewish people, however, were at such a height that he even said that even the most humble maidservant had a greater revelation of Hashem than all of the later rabbis, and every great person, as great as they were, they did not have such a direct revelation of Hashem's greatness. The Parsha then goes on. The Jewish people start protesting because they felt they didn't have food, and we're talking about going to Egypt, which was quite sad because actually they still had food left for that day, yet they protested, and in doing so, and this was after they had first complained about water, and Hashem made a special miracle with the water through Moshe, they had this stubbornness, partially slave mentality, that they refused to allow trust in Hashem, because Hashem was planning to make a greater miracle in the man, the special food, was that they wouldn't need food at all in the first, for all the time they were in the Midbar, which meant we wouldn't have had to eat or drink for 40 years. The Parsha then goes on to explain the man, and that on the 7th day of man, that the Jewish, that there would be twice the amount on the 6th day of the week, because there would be none poured out on Shabbat. However, some unbelievers, particularly Datan and Ambiram, who are going to show up again in rebellion against Hashem in Parshas Korach, Sefer Bamidbar, going out to search for it, and they wanted to make a trick. For a show that Moshe wasn't true, his words weren't true, and he wasn't a true representative of Hashem. They smuggled out man. However, the birds flew down early in the morning of the Shabbat and ate it all, which is where a tradition comes that we provide birds, food for the birds. Some say on Shabbat, but because there's a question of feeding wild animals that are not your domestic animals on Shabbat, they in fact often put out the bread on Erev Shabbat or shake out the tablecloth so that there are crumbs for the birds to eat on Shabbat. In any event, they also were taught the laws, the beginning of the laws of Shabbat, and in learning of Torah in general. They then come to Rephidim, and again, they are protesting water yet again, even though it's been clear how many times Hashem has provided for them. And Moshe breaks the rock at Hashem's command, the water comes out in the merit of Miriam, the great leader who had also led the Jewish women in song at, after the men had sung at the miracle of the splitting of the sea and the drowning of the Egyptians. And at that point, the enemy known as Amalek attacks the Jews, and only after a strong battle and renewed faith in Hashem, they finally defeat, they do not destroy Amalek. And Hashem says, until they are ultimately destroyed, Hashem's kisei, his throne, will not be complete. Something that has not yet happened to this day. What I'd like to focus on today are two different Weltanschauungen, different worldviews of how one views the universe. The first one, I'm going to emphasize here, concentrate on 3 Pesukim, which I would like to read in both the Hebrew and the English. The first Pasuk says, Pasuk 19 of chapter 14, V'yasam Malak Elokim v'holek lifnei Malkaneh Israel v'yilach macharayhem and Yesus imur anan v'fneihem and amud macharayhem. The angel of God who has been in front of the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud that was in front of them moved from front of them and went behind them. Pasuk 20, V'yavo ben Malkanayim Mitzrayim and ben Malkanah Israel v'hi anan choshek ye'er al laila and lo karav zeh kol alayla. It came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and there was cloud and darkness which illuminated the night, and one did not draw near the other. So the same cloud, for a dual function, it lit up the way for the Jewish people, but it stopped the enemy, the Egyptians, from behind, and miraculously, it was able to provide both light and darkness, and it provided an invulnerability shield, so to speak. The Egyptians tried shooting their weapons at the Jews just before and while they were crossing the Red Sea. However, Hashem made it in a spiritual force field, so to speak, and stopped all weapons from harming one single Jew. The third pasuk, V'yatem Moshe el yado al yam v'halek Adonai et hayam b'ro kadim hazev kol halayla and yesa et hamayim nayam, v'havra v'yakiyu hamayim. Moshe stretched out his hand to the sea, and Hashem moved the sea with a strong wind all the night. And he turned the sea to damp land, and the water split. Now, this pasuk, this verse, seems on the surface to be describing a miracle as part of what happened the night of the Yam Suf, where we were finally liberated from the Egyptians. However, on a deeper level, if one looks at each one of those verses, each one of those verses has 72 letters. Now, the number, and if you, so therefore the three verses I quoted all have 72 letters for a total of 216. And you're dividing that by 3, you'll get a situation where it divides into 72 three-letter words in the Hebrew. And those words are, in fact, revealing something important. What are those words? That is the 72 word name of Hashem. And it also reflects 3 aspects of Hashem, because when they move in the first pasuk, in the first verse, when they move the cloud, the angel move, and the cloud move behind, and it creates light for the Jewish people, so you can see the way across the Yam Suf at night. That is all derech chesed. That's all in the way of chesed, of kindness. The second quality of Hashem is reflected in the next pasuk, where the Egyptians are blocked and they're kept away from the Jews, and there's darkness enveloping them and their weapons. And that represents Hashem's quality of Gevurah, strict justice. And after that, we see the third quality of Hashem is when the Yam Suf splits and the sea is split in 12 parts so that the Jewish people can cross. We see Hashem's quality of Tiferes, which represents both the quality of chesed, kindness, and Gevurah, judgment, with the main emphasis here being chesed. In this particular verse, more than Gevurah, because the Gevurah, the strict justice, will come the next morning when the Jewish people are safely across. Moshe raises his staff, and the entire Egyptian army is washed out to the last man. Not only is it washed out to reassure the Jews, all the bodies are then thrown out of the sea, by the sea at Hashem's command, so that they can see there is no more Egyptian army. This, and on yet a deeper level, it is interesting that the Pesukim are 72, because 72 also represents one of the variations of the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei was the name that Hashem created the universe. What the gematria, the number is of each of those letters, the basic Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is 26, with the Yud being 10, the Vav being, the Hey being 5, Vav being 6, and the second Hey being 5, for a total of 26. Now, however, depending how one spells those letters, whether partially or fully, it comes to higher numbers. And in this case, I want to look at the quality of ayin base 72, and how is that derived? The letter Yud, Yud Vav Daled, comes out to 20. The letter Hey comes out to 15, it's spelled Hey Yud. The Vav comes out to 21, and finally the second 22, and the second Hey again comes out to 15 for a grand total of 72. Now that version of the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is the one of the highest level, and it represents Hashem's mastery of the universe, and through this name, He operates to guide the day-to-day events of both nature and humans. Now, there, the Jewish people are at the height, and it's preparing them greatly for what's going to come later with the Matan Torah and Parshas Yithro. However, there are already doubts occurring among the Jewish people, starting with them protesting the lack of food, as I mentioned before. And they were not studying the laws of Shabbat and the Torah the way they should have been. And then they again started complaining and slandering Hashem and Moshe for not providing water. And of course, there was another miracle made. And at that time, they were attacked by Amalek. Amalek, who is Amalek? Amalek was a nation, Amalekites, and it represents the direct contrary and opposite worldview to that of the Jewish people at the Yam Suf. And what is that view? And that view is that there is no God, there is no grand design, or there's no design at all behind the creation of the universe. Everything is random and routine. Now, it's interesting that the name Amalek has a gematria of 240. What other word has that gematria? In fact, it's one that appears nowhere in Tanakh, at least in the meaning I'm going to express in a second, which is Safek, which also has a gematria of 240, which means doubt. The whole view of Amalek, that there is no certainty, there is nothing grand behind the world, everything is haphazard. And as Rav Moshe Shapiro, Zichron Tzaddik Lebraka, explains, everything that occurs in the Torah had to already exist in this 7 days of creation. And what was created then? What was created then? What was created then that represents Amalek is the Eitz of Das of Tov and Ra, the tree of good and evil. It's often interpreted as being good or evil. It's actually good and evil. And what is the significance of that? Before Adam and Chava ate from the fruit, there was still a Yetzer Hara, epitomized by the snake, but that was external to Adam and Chava, who only had Tov, goodness within them. But after eating of the fruit, everything became confused. Good and bad all became one giant confusion, something we've had to deal with from then on to another. It's this confusion that allows the Yetzer Hara to sometimes gain the upper hand on us. Now, this concept of Amalek is a quality that was an eternal challenge, because even before Amalek, physical Amalek, was born, when the 4 kings are battling the 5 kings, it all acclaims on the plane of Amaleki, which Rashi explains is that even though the physical Amalek won't exist for quite a long time after that, he was the concubine, he was the product of the concubine of Eliphaz, Esav's son, in Timnah. And what does he in fact do? It's already creating confusion there, doubt. And Abraham has to pursue them to recapture Lot, and manages to defeat the 4 kings, the 4 so-called superpowers of that era. And the Jewish people were faced with Amalek. Now, where did that come from? Or why was Amalek allowed to attack them? Because the Jewish people doubted Hashem, And because of that, some people had spoken Lashon Hara against both Hashem and Moshe, and they were ejected from the protective cloud. It was mentioned at the regarding Yom Suf. And what happens then is they're open to attack. Now, in a very interesting thing, every time Moshe raises his staff up, his hands are up, he raises his staff, the Jewish people prevail, the Jewish army prevails against Amalek and his forces. Every single time his arm goes down, stick goes down, because this battle is going on for hours, the Amaleki prevail. So what is the meaning of this? It's not just that he's raising and lowering his staff. It's that every time they saw him uplifting the staff, they realized that Hashem was the true master of the universe and that they have nothing to fear from any earthly force. And with that renewed faith, they were assisted in a battle with Amalek. Every time the stick went down, they started looking at things in terms of tactics, military force, all the forces of the rest of the world that faced the rest of the world. And they could not prevail against Amalek. Amalek prevailed against them. However, finally, Moshe, with the help, they propped up his arms, and he was able to, long enough for the Jewish people to triumph. Now, what can we take from this today? Amalek, we do not know who the Amaleki are today, but the philosophy of Amalek certainly exists. There was a country known as the Soviet Union, which only collapsed a few years ago, relatively a couple of decades actually. And they said, if the, says Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Weinberg, or of the yeshiva in Baltimore, said, for 70 years, communism tried to prove God didn't exist. In a year and a half, God proved communism didn't exist. It was a miracle. It was overthrown with only 3 fatalities. Nobody could have foreseen this. And there are still other countries that have such philosophies. But what are we supposed to gain from day to day? That whenever we have doubts and we have concerns and start looking at things from so-called to have a practical point of view, to remember that Hashem is running the world, that whatever happens is good, and we should counter the doubt in the, what I call the Amalek factor. May everybody have a good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.